All right, so for whatever reason, your quiz seems to be focusing substantially on, say, like vitamins and whatnot, so stuff we already covered. So it's either going to be really easy for you or somewhat challenging, but let's hope it's the former and not the latter. All right, so a couple of things here. You have a BLA for this week, and all you're going to do is you're going to tell me what you eat for Thanksgiving, and you're going to justify your portion sizes by saying what kind of nutritional value you got from your food. So make sure you post that in the questions to the instructor forum over here. Quiz 5 due this week, and then that's that. Next Sunday, you have your 3-day diet analysis due. And then the last thing that you're gonna have as far as kind of a project bit is this special populations brochure. I'll cover this more when we get back, but essentially you're making like a trifold brochure about how you would treat a person with a particular condition, disease, dietary restrictions, whatnot, as far as what they should have in their diet. So we'll go over that more next week when we get back. All right, so for this week, well, actually real quick. All right, so we talked last time about water and with health and how water impacts us, what it does, all that good stuff. And today we are getting into this stuff called phytochemicals. So phytochemicals are really just different things, both good and bad, that come from plants. And there you go, from the Greek phyton. Now, the thing with these is that they're not considered an essential class of nutrients. Some of these can potentially do things that are really, really good for us, others not so much. So we'll take a look at some of those here a little bit later. For example, you look at, say, turmeric, and that is something, I don't know, I don't even know where I would use that. I think you use that like maybe in like pumpkin pies or something. I don't know. But it's actually something that can actually help with regulating blood glucose. So people who have diabetes will regularly take turmeric supplements to help with that. There's the resveratrol from grapes is the one phytochemical that's always argued making red wine something worth drinking. And yeah, that can actually help with, say, like lowering blood pressure. However, the amount you have to drink will be ineffective because of how much alcohol you have to consume to make it worth it. So remember, alcohol itself is going to actually raise your blood pressure. The phytochemical in there, in specifically red wine, will lower it, but it's a lot less of an effect. So if you were to get like non-alcoholic wine with that in there, then yeah, that'd be really good. But that kind of defeats the whole purpose of drinking wine if you're just drinking grape juice, you know? So really, unsurprisingly, there's a lot of different things we find in plants that have some sort of medicinal quality to them, or have some sort of either nutritional quality to them, or even some sort of like even potential weaponized quality about them. Virtually all of our modern medicine has been either directly as a result of or adapted from chemicals we found in plants. Now, for most modern medicines, you don't take, say, you know, the actual chemical from the plant, harvest it, and use that. You usually make a synthesized version of it, or just extract whatever the chemical is you're trying to get, and you can synthesize that. Otherwise, you usually have to get a whole ton of stuff just to get a small amount of your viable chemical that you're trying to use. Now, with that, since these aren't considered essential nutrients, you can't make claims about them. So what you'll see on, not really nutrition labels, but what you'll see on, like say, supplement bottles is the word may. May is like one of the big key terms. You know, have any of you ever heard of the show Ancient Aliens? And like, there's always like this running joke on all these other shows that on Ancient Aliens, they said something along the lines of, well, we don't know if aliens built the pyramids, but we have no reason to believe they didn't do it. And with like supplement bottles, the word may is that same thing. This may help with treating high blood pressure. This may do something to promote heart health. This may be good for your nervous system. But that's the whole bit with this whole unregulated part. Supplements are unregulated, meaning you can pretty much say and do anything you want with the supplement as long as you don't make claims of curing or treating, and you can't be harmful. So the whole Hippocratic Oath still applies to that, you know, first do no harm. So supplements really only make the news when they have gross misrepresentations of claims or they start harming people. That's the biggest things. The only supplement that has FDA approval is Orlistat. So the brand name is Ally, the fat blocking supplement. That's the only supplement that has FDA approval. And I forget what the company was, or the company is that makes it, but they went through the entire FDA process of getting essentially a drug approved for their supplement. And they went through all the different trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials, did the whole FDA approval, spent hundreds of millions of dollars doing it, got approval, and it works. But they really didn't have to do that if they didn't want to. It's just now, because it works and because it's FDA approved, they can do things like, say, get reimbursement from your insurance. Your doctor can prescribe you vitamins, supplements, whatever, but your insurance won't pay for them because those aren't a FDA approved medication. If it's not an FDA approved medication, your insurance isn't going to cover it. Because this is FDA approved, your insurance will cover it if it's, you know, indicated for your condition, whatever. Typically, if you're well overweight, that would be something you would take. And if you think about it, would a company or would an insurance company rather pay for a $15 medication or a $30,000 weight loss surgery? Yeah, right? This gets into kind of the debate on, you know, prescription drug prices and things like that. And yeah, I will agree that prescription drugs are, if you take them at face value, extremely expensive, like overly expensive. But you also have to look at what the alternatives are. One of the best examples of this is with hepatitis C. So one of the medications that will essentially cure hepatitis C is called Harvoni. And it costs roughly $10,000 a pill. And you have to take, I think, at least 10 weeks worth of them, something like that. Total treatment's around $100,000, $150,000. And only a fraction of that gets covered by insurance for the most part. But let's look at the alternative. What happens if you need a liver transplant? Well, first off, if you survive 5 years after that, pending you do get an actual liver, your estimated cost is around about $3 to $5 million for that. So yeah, I mean, you're talking about the lesser of two evils, But when you look at it in terms of that, it makes that 150,000 look a lot more attractive. Either way, yeah, it's a ton of money, and you don't want to have to pay that ever. But when you talk about those costs between, like, say, something at the end result or end stage result versus having to pay up front, you know, you see how much cheaper the medication is. So looking at this stuff here with our phytochemicals, these are really going to be things, at least what myself and many other researchers think, are going to really house a lot of the keys to our future, really, medication and disease fighting ability. I had a biology professor when I was undergrad tell me this anecdotal story, and it made a lot of sense when I was learning about this stuff. When you look at, say, any kind of pathogen, especially like bacterial pathogens, the best way to get rid of them is to make sure that they can't compete with your body. If you put a pathogen in your body and just allow it to do its thing, typically it'll take over because it's usually like stronger than what you have in there. However, if you did something like, say, take soil from the ground and spread it all over your countertops and allowed the natural good bacteria to compete with the bad ones, most likely that would outcompete it because there's more good bacteria than bad bacteria. However, to recreate that kind of in your body takes a lot more doing. And that's where you look at trying to have more of these plant-based phytochemicals and good bacteria, these probiotic type bacteria available so that you can have a naturally higher defense in your gut biome against a lot of these pathogens from infiltrating. It's not a foolproof plan by any means. I mean, it's not going to protect you from viruses or anything like that, but for as far as bacteria is concerned, it can really go a long way. Now, looking at some of these different things here, I want to be very careful how I present this to you because I don't want to give you the wrong impression about what these phytochemicals can and can't do. But there is research to support and refute many of these claims. I mean, really, if you look at most any claim of anything science related, there's always going to be someone that's for and against it. So for some of these bigger things, don't necessarily put all your eggs in one basket, but kind of use this as more of a tool in a much greater toolbox. It's kind of a better way to look at it. So in terms of, say, cancer prevention, we talked about how cancer forms previously, and all the cancer is an uncontrolled cell growth. I mean, that's really all it is. What you want to avoid with cancers, or what really causes that uncontrolled cell growth, is when you have any kind of DNA damage. DNA damage that can't be repaired then leads to replication errors. You get a replication error, and then that can kind of spin out of control, and that's what kind of turns on that cancer growth. Things like, say, your phytoestrogens or lycopene, these are two examples of phytochemicals that are thought to help with preventing DNA damage, so helping with DNA repair. This would be something that wouldn't necessarily help you if you had cancer, but it would be another shield for you against preventing it. Now, again, all of these things aren't going to be foolproof, but it's something that helps. So if someone's going to, like, say, shoot me in the chest at point blank range. This may not be bulletproof, but it's going to help if I put this over my chest to, you know, at least take some of the brunt of that bullet. I mean, yeah, it may completely go straight through it, in and out of me, and nothing happens. I mean, not nothing happens, but like it doesn't do anything to protect me. Or it could, you know, potentially stop the bullet completely. Either way, I would much rather have some sort of defense against that, even if I know it's not the best defense system, or I'm not sure if it's a viable defense system. It's something that's going to help there. I've told you about, you know, how DNA is the ultimate decider, or your genetics are your ultimate decider on really what happens. But your actual choices in the real world shouldn't be things that push that one way or another, especially if it's that one way is to bad things. You know, my genetics may predispose me to, say, you know, breast cancer, which is very genetically linked, especially maternally. So, you know, for females, if your grandmother had breast cancer and your mother had breast cancer, odds are you're probably going to get it. But do I want to go and say, you know, start smoking and start, you know, just sunbathing all day, every day, just because I, you know, well, I'm going to get it anyway, so might as well, it doesn't matter if I put any more carcinogens in me. And you don't want to, you know, edge it forward. You don't want to speed that up. Now, things like, say, flavonoids, these are really good antioxidants, but like many things, these can be really bad when you have them in large quantities. So remember how we talked about with antioxidants, how they are going to neutralize free radicals. They take the unpaired electron from a free radical, they neutralize it, all's good. Well, for flavonoids, if you take a whole bunch of these, you can actually increase oxidation reactions. So it may actually help with speeding up, like, say, fat oxidation, but at the same time, it's also going to rapidly increase the amount of free radicals you produce, which can then cause, you know, the whole cellular damage thing. So keeping in that narrow channel is really where you want to be with that. Something like fiber. We've talked about how fiber does a whole lot for, say, like helping keep you satiated or feeling full. It can help with speeding up digestion. If you have way too much fiber, what can happen to you? Yeah. Too much fiber will block you up. So some is good, a ton is bad. Now, here is where we get into the good stuff, the phytotoxins. Phytotoxins are your subset of phytochemicals, and these are the things that can potentially cause real bad stuff to happen. So a lot of your enes, so these alkaloids, they usually end in INE, these are all plant-based. So caffeine, nicotine, morphine, ephedrine, cocaine. These all are stimulants. So these are really central nervous system stimulants. Any of these in small quantities are not lethal by any means, but if you take any of these in large quantities, you are most likely going to die. We know that caffeine in large quantities is a dehydrator. It can also cause irregular heartbeats and potentially lead to cardiac arrest. This is why, like, say, if you're working outside in the summer here, drinking caffeine is like the worst thing you can do for yourself, because not only will it speed up dehydration, because it speeds up your heart rate along with speeding up or heating your body up, so it increases thermogenesis. You're going to sweat more. Sweating more is going to make you further dehydrated. You're going to urinate more because you have a stimulant in you, and the extra heat can then cause heat exhaustion, heat illness, and then potentially, make your heart stop. You usually hear about a couple of cases of that every year in Phoenix, where someone drinks one of those like canisters of Monster energy drink and is working outside in the sun, and then all of a sudden they die. No pre-existing conditions or whatnot. Well, you take that much caffeine and drink that, pairing it with heat and water loss, yeah, it's the perfect combination to make your heart stop. Nicotine, obviously with any of these alkaloids, these play a big role in addiction. Alkaloids are going to attach themselves to serotonin receptors. We've talked about serotonin and dopamine being kind of your antidepressant receptors or antidepressant molecules that you produce, but we never really differentiated the two. You have many more serotonin receptors than you do dopamine receptors. Serotonin, I forget the exact number. I believe there's 14 different serotonin receptors and only 5 dopamine receptors. Don't quote me on that though. All I know is that there is considerably more serotonin receptors you have in your brain than dopamine ones. Serotonin is your pleasure neurotransmitter. Dopamine is your feel-good neurotransmitter. Do you see the inherent difference between the two? If you feel good, like you all, I'd imagine, are feeling good right now. I mean, are any of you feeling euphoric and just over the moon right now being in class at 7 a.m.? Like, is this something like you got here and just all of a sudden just like, I can't control myself, my body, But, you're all seeming pretty leveled off here. That's what a signal for dopamine does. It makes you feel good. I feel fine, kind of thing. Serotonin is where I get like that euphoric rush kind of thing. Any chemical that targets serotonin receptors typically are the ones that are much more addictive or have addictive qualities to them, because serotonin will give you that higher pleasure or euphoric response. Dopamine gives you that even feel. Like dopamine makes you even keel. Not high, not low, I'm just good. Serotonin though, you want to have a good time? Serotonin is my +1. So all these alkaloids target your serotonin receptors. Have you ever seen the movie Thanks for Smoking? It stars Aaron Eckhart, and it's a play on like the big tobacco, big pharma, NRA kind of stuff, industries, about how there's lobbyists that essentially control everything kind of thing. Well, anyways, Aaron Eckhart is the main lobbyist for big tobacco. And what's funny is you never see anyone smoke in the entire film, which was kind of funny. But near the end, somebody abducts him, or some group abducts him who's against smoking, and they cover his whole body in nicotine patches. And essentially he nearly dies from it. So you don't think of say nicotine being something that can immediately kill you. I mean, you definitely think of it as being addictive. And then all that other stuff you would have from say smoking cigarettes or whatever can contribute to things like lung cancer, all that different lung disease. But you can overdose on nicotine similar to how you can overdose on cocaine. Now, when we talk about potencies, nicotine is not nearly as potent as say, ephedrine or cocaine or morphine, but you can still overdose and die on it. Now, morphine's the only one here that's a actual depressant. You think of morphine as a painkiller. So this actually does the opposite of what most other, really all other alkaloids will do. but all of your opioids are derived from morphine. Now, terpenes, something like menthol, this isn't too terrible for you. You look at menthol, and menthol, you know, is, you think of like a minty kind of flavored thing, whatever. The really only bad thing menthol can do for you is give you GI upset. It actually will help with, like, say, soothing a sore throat, or it can help alleviate, you know, like, say, some coughing or whatnot. So that's really what you'd use menthol for. Menthol can also help with, like, opening up your airways. So specifically like your nose when you have like a stuffy nose, but it doesn't do it by, like, say, deactivating histamines. It does it by essentially tricking your body into thinking that you have a more of an opening than what you do. So it actually helps to reduce blood flow to the area and allow your blood vessels to constrict so that it opens up your airways more. If you consume too much menthol, so if you like took a whole bag of cough drops at once, it would probably make you throw up. Menthol is not going to kill you, but it will give you an upset stomach. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you know, not terrible, but still something you don't necessarily want to have happen. Tannins, another thing you'll find in wine. Tannins, or tannic acid, is the acids that are produced from grapes, especially during the fermenting process. This is what gives, especially like dry wines, their, I guess, dry qualities to them, and why you want to let the wine breathe when you first open it. You do that so that you can essentially mix the air in with these, and it'll help to neutralize or break down these tannic acids. Tannins are highly volatile, and when they're mixed with air, they'll oxidize really quickly and essentially go away. These can, they won't kill you directly, but if you consume too much tannic acid, it would give you like ulcers. You know, you could potentially perforate, like, say, your stomach or your esophagus from them. If you were eating a lot of unripe fruits, especially a lot of unripe citrus fruits, they contain a lot of tannic acids in them, or a lot of tannins in them. Another one of these, and I wanted to just pull this up real quick here. Is this ricin. So you see a lot of these happen every now and then. And what ricin is it's a derivative. Where is that? There we go. It's a derivative of castor beans. So these are your castor beans. And if you look at this, that's a little bothersome, right? Needless to say, can't grow castor beans in America. You also can't grow, like, say, opium poppies either. While there is a very small amount of, like, opioids or opium inside poppy seeds, like even if you eat your everything bagel or your poppy seed bagel, the amount is so minute that it's not even detectable. If you were to just scrape off all of the poppy seeds from the bagel and then add about 1,000 more bagels worth, then yeah, you might feel something. But you're talking about guzzling down like a barrel full of them kind of thing. The where you would get any of the opioid-based derivatives from, like poppies, is actually from their unripened seed pod. You actually would kind of cut into it, and there's sap that's in there, and that sap that leaks out is what actually is containing it. So very little, if any, gets into the actual seed itself. But yeah, ricin, if you get even a small amount of this, this will kill you quick. So you can see how some of these phytotoxins can be extremely terrible for us there. Now, where do we find all these? Most all of our phytochemicals, especially like our good ones, are going to be in colored foods. Usually your white foods are going to be your least nutritious for the most part. So white and brown stuff typically is not going to be the best everything for you. Now you look at something like, for example, let's say bananas. I think everyone would agree that bananas are inherently good for you. But really, there's not a whole heck of a lot in bananas that makes them all that worth it. Yeah, they have some potassium in there, but not a heck of a lot. They do have some vitamin C, but really, when you want to get the best bang for your buck, you want to have all the colors of the rainbow. The rainbow is the best thing for you in terms of your nutritional variety. And this is again in terms of like plant-based stuff. So it doesn't count like, red doesn't count for like your red meat kind of thing. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. All of these different colors are created from different chemicals. I mean, most all of our dyes are synthesized from, plant-based colorings. And the whole reason why we have all these different colors is because the chemicals cause them to turn these different colors. Now, I'm not saying that I would, stay away from all these, but again, if you want the best bang for your buck, the rainbow is the way to go. All right, so that is our phytochemicals. How do you feel about those? Pretty straightforward. I mean, you don't really have to remember all the different types of chemicals and whatnot. I would just make sure you know the generalities of them. They come from plants. They're chemicals that can have potential medicinal benefits to them. They could also have potentially very toxic qualities to them. Now, physical activity. First off, what's the difference between physical activity and exercise?
Everyday stuff like going to the grocery store or like going for a walk or something. And then exercise would be like more high intensity.
You're kind of right. But what happens if you're chasing after me with a knife and I run away? Would you call that exercise? It's kind of like, what's the definition of a vegetable? Yeah, not a fruit, right? Everyone knows a fruit, well, hopefully everyone knows, a fruit is any sort of flesh produced from a plant that contains seeds within it. That's a fruit. Vegetable is a little bit more ambiguous with its definition. There really isn't a set definition for vegetable other than it can't contain seeds within its flesh, and it's typically considered to be more savory than sweet. That's about it. Really, vegetable is more of a culinary-based term than it is an actual like biological or nutritious-based term. Because if you look at, like, say, All right, carrots, for example, are a vegetable. Well, carrots are a root. They're a taproot. So you would define them as a root-based food product. Or you look at, say, something like ginger. Ginger is a rhizome, meaning it has an underground stem to it. So you wouldn't define that as necessarily a vegetable, but it is. So you see how it's, so with exercise and physical activity is any movement you make. You blink, physical activity. You nod, you talk, physical activity. Now, I wouldn't go and say, all right, I'm blinking 1,000,000 times today. That's my, burning all my calories for the day. I mean, all physical activity requires some sort of energy to do. Anytime you have energy or anytime you have movement, you have to have energy to do it. But how much energy does it take you to blink versus running a marathon kind of thing? Exercise is anything that you have intent, a plan, and sustained activity along with goals. So if I want to exercise, I have a plan to do it, so I intend to do it. Jacqueline's not just chasing me down the street and I'm running away. That's physical activity, that's not exercise. It might be good physical activity, but it's still just physical activity. Now, where this would be a gray area is if we both planned on her doing that at some point and then agreed that she would do that for 10 minutes. But no, you're getting into semantics there. So with exercise, again, you are planning it out. You have the intent to do it. It is typically something that is regular, and it's something that has goals attached to it. I mean, you don't have to necessarily say a goal such as I'm going to be losing 10 pounds in the next 5 weeks kind of thing. But a goal could be I'm going to walk for 10 minutes today. That would be essentially a goal. Physical activity is unplanned. So that's really the big differentiator, is planned versus unplanned. And sustained activity. When I do stuff like, say, gardening, that's potentially a higher intensity activity depending on what I'm doing. When I am, tilling out my soil by hand, that takes a lot of work, but that's not exercise. Now, if I were, say, chopping wood without, any kind of, I guess, reason other than I needed to chop wood for doing activity, then you could probably count that as exercise. Like, I'm gonna go chop wood for 20 minutes today kind of thing. You could probably count that as exercise. But when I took the tree stump out of my front yard and I was chopping out those roots for days on end, probably not. So anyways, just a long-winded way to tell you differences there between physical activity and exercise. Now, this whole role of fitness and weight in health. In general, adults that weigh less tend to be the healthiest, within reason. If you're underweight, that can be just as bad as being overweight. Now, when you get into advanced age, being slightly overweight is actually advantageous to you. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But for all of you, so for anyone that's in, let's say, the, 18 to 40-year-old range, why is it better to weigh less?
we talked about before how like being overweight or obesity is like linked to different like, health issues, but I don't know necessarily why that's different for us as opposed to people who are older.
And that's fair. But yeah, you're right though that it is linked to a lot of different health issues. If you look at it just from a pure mechanical standpoint, you know, did any of you ever carry like really heavy backpacks in high school? And how good does that feel on you? Well, now imagine you're carrying that permanently. That is really, mechanically speaking, the major problem with obesity. Carrying the extra weight is going to just speed up the breakdown of your body. Right now, you're kind of at your peak in terms of how your body is structurally made up. So you're kind of at your strongest. Unfortunately, it's all kind of all downhill from here. The more impact you have, the more it breaks down your cartilage, the more it is going to, cause wear and tear on your body. You get aches and pains as you age, that kind of thing. So the more that you weigh, especially earlier on, the quicker you speed up that process. Now, this doesn't account for, like, say, getting injuries or something like that. Like if you got hurt, then yeah, that's going to just exponentially speed things up more, regardless of what your body composition is. But ideally, you want to be lighter to have a better long-term mechanical or physiological prognosis kind of thing. This doesn't mean that, if you're overweight or obese, that you're a terrible person or you're going to die kind of thing. But what it does mean is that from a physiological perspective, it's going to cause your body to break down faster. So we talked about all these good things here. When you, and what all of this really emphasizes is the adaptations we have to exercise, not necessarily the goals you should have for exercise. So there are a class of people who can be fit and fat, but those are kind of few and far between. Usually, if you're exercising regularly, you're usually eating at a pretty decent rate, or you have a pretty decent diet. You don't usually see people that are, your triathletes that are eating terrible all day, every day kind of thing. Those two are usually like, they clash. So what you need to look at with exercise is what it'll actually do for your body as opposed to what you want your body to do as a result of exercise. So exercise does all this good stuff. So why don't more people do it?
They don't have time.
Okay, that is the number one reason why people say they don't exercise is time. Number two is motivation to change or lack thereof. The major problem with something like exercise and with your diet is that there's no immediate negative effect to it. So you all have a quiz due on Sunday. If you don't do that quiz, what happens on Monday? You get a 0. You have an immediate negative impact. You have a deadline. If you miss that deadline, immediate consequence. If I don't exercise today, what's my consequence? What if I don't exercise the next year? Or 5 or 10 years? I mean, you can't ever tell me that there is a single time until it happens that I'm going to face a consequence. Without having a deadline attached to something, it makes follow through very, very spastic or very volatile. If you were to say, okay, if you don't exercise, then on Sunday you're going to get heart disease, guarantee every single person would be exercising. But because that doesn't happen, you can't, or you're not going to get that same response as if you had a deadline attached to it. Now, that also doesn't tell you about when you actually would exercise, because how many of you have done homework or assignments at the very last minute, turning them in at 11:59 for whatever reason? So exercise and diet are one of those things that we all know we should do well with them, but first off, it's hard to do. It's not as fun to be exercising or to be eating healthy as opposed to, you know, guzzling down beer and having ice cream every day. But it's really all because of the lack of consequences attached to it. I mean, you can look at this from like even a moral or ethical standpoint. If you could do something that's considered illegal, but you knew you would never get caught, would you do it? So if I knew, for example, I could get paid to work and not actually do the work, but I knew, or I was in such a position that it didn't matter if I showed up or not, like everything was on cruise control, would I go into work every day? And again, we're saying there's guaranteed no consequences. So you see how that kind of works there. How much exercise and physical activity should we get each week? So the ACSM, or American College of Sports Medicine, says that you should get at least 150 minutes of overall physical activity or exercise every week. And that is moderate to vigorous physical activity, meaning at least a walking pace or greater. And you should be doing at least 10 continuous minutes at a time. So if you want to get any meaningful results, at least 10 continuous minutes, at least aerobically speaking. Not to say like 9 minutes isn't doing anything for you, but just, you know, standard there. What is one of the benefits of exercise is that our body views it in the aggregate. So our body would view one 30-minute session of exercise the same way as it would view 3 10-minute sessions of exercise. So our body takes everything in the aggregate. Now, it only does that if you have the same intensity level for everything, but you get the idea there. Moderate is, like I said, a walking pace, about 3.5 miles an hour. Vigorous would be, like, say, hiking. Higher intensity or high intensity exercise would essentially be exercise where you couldn't carry on a conversation while doing it. So if you were like running, I don't know how many of you can run and carry on a full conversation at the same time. That's high intensity. Only about 8 to 10% of the US population gets their weekly exercise in, or weekly physical activity or exercise in. And only about 20% of the population has an appropriate diet. And this is for apparently healthy adults. Oh, and there we go, I just said that. Huh. All right, this gets more into like XPhys stuff. So I just want to give you a quick overview of this. But when you progress with exercise, you have to continuously do more or you're not going to progress. So the concept is actually called progressive overload. And it just says that like if you want to get stronger, you have to lift heavier weights kind of thing, or you just have to do more of what you're doing. If you wanted to improve endurance, you have to do longer duration of exercise, that kind of thing. In terms of improving, like say, metabolism or calorie burning, you need to go at higher intensities. So if you, and you also need to periodize or mix things up. So there's all these different tweaks to make, but kind of just like your diet, if you're doing an exercise program that's regular and it varies, or like the program itself varies, that's pretty much everything you need there. Talked about the how your metabolism responds to exercise. When we talk about EPOC, remember that the higher the intensity of exercise you do, the more your metabolism is raised after you're done exercising, the more fat you'll burn after exercise. You don't really want to be burning fat during exercise, you want to burn fat after exercise. This just illustrates how that works. This is called your non-protein RQ, or your respiratory quotient. You may also see it labeled as R or RER, which is your respiratory exchange ratio. And that just says how much oxygen am I consuming versus how much CO2 am I producing. The higher my intensity, meaning the more amount of CO2 I produce, the less fat I use, the more carbs I use, but afterward, the more fat I burn, the less carbs I burn. If you exercise in the cold, you will never be able to perform at your max level. And you think about it, like if you're just cold, how well are you moving? You know, your fingers get stiff, you know, you get goose pimples, all that good stuff. Body just kind of tightens up. So you'll never be able to get your actual max level or max intensity of exercise in the cold. However, because your body has to work on thermoregulation so vastly during cold weather exercise, you actually are going to burn the most amount of fat from doing this. And it's all because your body has to keep you warm. The warmer it keeps you, the more it has to use fat oxidation or burning fat to make you warm or keep you warm. So whenever you burn fat or oxidize fat, all oxidation reactions give off an immense amount of heat. They're exothermic. That's why you say you burn fat. You are quite literally oxidizing it, which makes it release heat, makes you warmer. If you had, say, like asthma, exercise in the cold is a very bad idea unless you're wearing like a mask or some sort of covering over your face, because it'll help keep moisture in. If you are too hot, you experience this thing called cardiac drift, where if you are exercising at a steady state, your heart rate will actually continuously go higher because you are becoming more and more dehydrated. You will burn more calories total in the heat, and you may experience more fat loss during the exercise itself, but your EPOC time is going to be highly variable because your fatigue level will typically be quicker due to more dehydration. All right, supplements here. Like I said, supplements are unregulated. When you talk about supplements at work, these are the 4 that work. Out of anything else that you can take, it's kind of a crapshoot. caffeine, creatine, sodium bicarbonate, beta-alanine. Those are the 4 that essentially have been proved to work. There's a big one I left off this list. What is that? When you think of supplements, what's a major supplement that comes to mind? You always see people at the gym taking this, especially after they work out. How about your whey protein? Ah, there we go. Why would I leave protein off the list? It's not so much that it doesn't work, it's that you don't need it. Your typical American diet gives you more than enough protein than what you could ever do with. And remember, where do we store proteins?
It's in your gut,
Huh?
in your fats.
Well, yeah, we don't.
Oh,
So yeah, if you want to store proteins, you have to convert them to fat, which your body doesn't like to do. You can also convert them to carbs, which your body also doesn't like to do. Remember, it takes roughly 2 to 3 grams of proteins to produce 1 gram of carbs. So our body really doesn't like that, considering they're both metabolically equivalent. The average person who is active and exercising needs about 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. If you are, say, like a bodybuilder, you're talking about 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, which isn't that much, really. If we do the math on it, so let's say you weighed 220 pounds, that is 100 kilograms, times that by, let's say, 1.8, that's 180 grams of protein, 720 calories. I guess I should do this. So 36%. That's at the upper end. Because remember, how much of a percentage should you have protein for your overall calories? $10 to 35%, very good. So at 36%, you're slightly over. But again, that's just doing a 2,000 calorie diet. Most likely if you're exercising regularly and you weigh 220 pounds, you're probably having a much greater than a 2,000 calorie diet. But still, you don't need that much protein. Your body's not going to use it. What's even worse, well, I shouldn't say worse, but what's even more wasteful is if you buy, say, amino acid supplements. Because remember, when you digest dietary proteins, your body has to turn them into amino acids before it absorbs them. So if you are using an amino acid supplement, yeah, you're going to absorb them a little faster than you would like whey protein, but it's not going to give you any additional benefit than what you would get from the protein itself. So for the most part, protein is kind of a waste. If you would use it, if you want to use it as like, say, a meal replacement or as like a snack substitute, now that's a different story. So if I work out, say, at lunch, or lunchtime, and my protein shake after lunch, or whatever, after my workout is my lunch, okay, I'm with you there. But you see how you're using that as a meal replacement. If I were eating my full lunch and then taking a protein supplement on top of that, now that's just excessive. If you wanted to gain weight, then okay, that's another instance I will give that to you. But if you're looking just for general health, or if you're looking for weight loss, protein supplement's not really needed. Save your money. Or if you're gonna buy a protein supplement, I always tell people, and I hate to be, support any one given brand, Body Fortress from Walmart has the highest amount of protein in it per serving, the lowest amount of carbs and calories overall, so like lowest amount of sugars in it, and it costs the least. You can get a month's worth of that for like 20 bucks. If you do any of like the more popular brands, they're ridiculously expensive. The one I used to like was Synthesix from BSN, and it tasted amazing. It was pretty good, nutritionally speaking, but it was like 60 bucks a month. Now I will say that there are certain like GNC store brands that you can get like the 50-gallon kind of tub with it for very cheap, but it tastes like you're drinking vomit. So there is a bit of a line you got to draw there. Because if you can't consume something, you're not going to use it. But we know that caffeine works. Creatine works because this is actually going to help us to work harder when we have high intensity exercise. Creatine is the first thing our body depletes when we do really any exercise. So your ATP-PCR system, your adenosine triphosphate phosphocreatine system, is your stored ATP. You have about 10 to 20 seconds worth. If you're taking a creatine supplement, it actually helps to replenish muscles after exercise to increase high intensity exercise capacity. Sodium bicarbonate is baking soda. It's also found in chalk or Tums, like antacids. So that actually will help with maintaining your blood pH balance or your muscle pH balance. Helps reduce soreness. Now, this is soreness from metabolic acidosis. This isn't soreness related to, like, say, micro tears in your muscle or DOMS, which is delayed onset muscle soreness. So it can help you like immediately to feel better, but it won't do anything to prevent you from having muscle soreness related with micro tears, which is what are needed to make your muscles stronger. And then beta-alanine is a one of your essential amino acids. And this can actually help with increasing overall exercise capacity. So increasing aerobic capacity is a better term to put there. So those are the four that'll do it. All right, so that is everything I wanted to cover here with phytochemicals and physical activity. What kind of questions do you all have about that? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop recording now